Shalom, I know him well, very chashuva Rav in Baltimore, and Rabbi Fink himself was a law student of mine at the University of Maryland many years ago, but he's gone on to bigger and better things than our UCC discussions, and he's also become a very, very popular and well-received Maggid Shir on many inyanim of Torah and Hashkafa. So we have the honor of hearing him for the second time, and I hope, Bezos Hashem, that you'll gain a lot. So here's Rabbi Fink.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry. So, the last time I was here, we talked about a very different topic, the connection between Bnei Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Today, we're going to talk about something very different, and that is the important roles that different people play in the history of Klal Yisrael. We're going to learn this through several Gemaras and several things from Pirkei Avos, but an interesting thing, of all Jewish literature, perhaps nothing is cited more in the Goyish Welt, scripture obviously, than Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos is filled with all these sayings and slogans and things that are just, they're so obvious to us because we've heard them since the day we were born, like who is a wealthy person, someone who appreciates what he has, and things of that nature. These are things that we're used to hearing about. Who is a wise man, someone who sees the effects of what he does and his maisim. These types of things from Pirkei Avos have become part of the world lore, not just Jewish lore. And it's for good reason. But nevertheless, there's some unbelievable historic limudim, teachings from Pirkei Avos. If you have the source sheets, they will be very helpful. The first source is just something simple, which I'm sure most of you have stumbled across already. Some of these I did put the translation down for you in case you wanted to keep the source sheet. It's a little easier for some people. It's just a simple Mishnah. Rebbe Lezer ben Azariah Omer, Imein Torah, Ein Derech Eretz, Imein Derech Eretz, Ein Torah. You have to have balance. Imein Chachma, Ein Yira, Ein Yira, Ein Chachma. Imein Bina, Ein Das. They have to have all these types of things in order for the other one to work. You can't just be learning Torah all the time because you'll starve to death. You can't be too busy working all the time. You won't have time to learn Torah. You can't be obsessed with Bina to the exclusion of Chachma. You have to have everything partial and halfway so that you can balance it out. The translation's very simple. There's no worldly occupation, then there's no Torah. If there's no wisdom, there's no fear. If there's no fear, there's no wisdom. These are all reciprocal things. These are the teachings of Rebbe Lezer ben Azariah. And that's our focus, is going to be the idea from this idea of balance. If you look at source number 2, you'll find something which really hasn't much found its way into popular yeshiva lore these days, but it's from one of those, archaic sites, it's called Rashi. Rashi, wasn't exactly known as being a liberal trailblazer, but listen to this, what Rashi says. The first pasuk of Parshas Bechukosai, it's the underlined first line, Bechukosai telechu v'esmitzvosai tishmoru v'asisem osam, and you go down right below that into the smaller print, you have Rashi's words, and he says, Have amelim b'Torah al manas lishmor ulakayim. The reason we learn Torah is so we know how to do the mitzvahs. Yes, learning Torah is a mitzvah in and of itself, but Rashi says the reason we learn Torah is so we know how to do the mitzvahs. How are you going to know that you're supposed to unload a donkey that's overweight if no one tells you? How do you know how to give Meiser properly? How do you know what Meiser is? How do you know to leave the corner of your fields? How do you know to respect your parents? There's certain things that you know because they're part of your culture, but the Torah tells you these things, and the Torah tells you should learn Torah because this is the instruction manual. If you go out to a store now and you buy I don't know what they call them now, an iPod recording device, whatever it is, it comes with either a 80-page booklet to tell you all the features that it has, Or you could it could come with a mini CD-ROM, which you can plug into a computer and it'll tell you everything, or it'll give you a link to a website that will give you 300 pages of instructions of how to use this new product that you bought. Does anyone really think that the Ribbono Shalom would have created a world and not given us an instruction manual? The Torah is our instruction manual. Yes, it happens to be, academically and intellectually stimulating, sure, but that's not what it's about. That's why there's years and years, decades of history left out. It's not a history book. There's certain things of history that are recorded for us, but that's not what it's for. And Rashi tells us in this radical idea that the reason we learn Torah is so we know how to do the mitzvahs. Well, if you go down to source number 3, you're going to find out a lot about what I think Rashi was talking about. Source number 3 is a Gemara in Brachos. It's one of my absolute favorite Gemaras, because literally in the course of 15 to 18 lines, there are 8, 9 profoundly mudim. Let's start off with number 1. First of all, a little Jewish history. After the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, everybody has heard of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda was the first Nasi. I guess the best translation is president or chief of Bnei Yisrael. This was a position created by the Jewish people in an attempt to preserve Malchus Beis David. The Davidic kingdom had to be continued so that when Mashiach would come, we would know who was going to be Melech. And there had to be a lineage, and we knew that Malchus Beis David was supposed to be in charge of Klal Yisrael. So, after the Churban, they started this thing called the Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda was the first Nasi. He was a direct descendant of David HaMelech, and he was therefore chosen to be the first Nasi. His son, Rabbi Gamliel, was one of the great scholars in the Gemara. Rabbi Gamliel shows up as much as anyone in the Gemara, and he was the second Nasi after his father, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Now, if you look through the annals of Jewish history, it's an interesting thing, because we have the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im were obviously the closest to Hashem. They're getting right in their ear the words of Hashem, telling them what should be done, what they should do. But the power was not vested in the Navi. Klal Yisrael had it set up as a trifecta, not dissimilar to the way Western governments are set up now. Yes, there was the Navi, and we also had the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the council of elders of great Talmidei Chachamim and Nevi'im. And then there was the Melech. The Melech was the chief executive, and the Melech was in charge. And if the Navi told the Melech, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told to me, and the Melech said, yeah, but we have to do X, Y, or Z, they followed the Melech, often to their peril. When the Melech didn't listen to the Navi, it almost always resulted in bad results. But nevertheless, this is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu set it up. There's the Navi, who has the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but didn't always have this thing that we call executive function. That had to be left to somebody else. The Melech is worried about treaties and this and supplies and all these things that the Navi couldn't be worried about. The Melech has to be worried about running the society. The Navi's worried about the spiritual purity. And this continued into the period of time of the Nasi that happened in the time of the Gemara. So just follow me in source number 3 here. I underlined the first part, so I'm sorry I didn't underline all of the stuff that we're going to talk about, but I'll try to direct you to the right line. Listen to this. Tana Rabbanan, Ma'aseh b'Talmud Echad, there was a time that one student came, Lifnei Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua was a direct descendant of one of the Nevi'im. He was one of the Gedolei Hadar of the time. Rabbi Yehoshua was a great Torah scholar in this time. And they came in front of Rabbi Yehoshua, Amar Lei, and they said to him, Tefillas Arvis, davening Marv at night. Is it a Rishus or Chova? Is it a permissive tefillah or is it an obligatory tefillah? Amar Lei, Rishus. Rabbi Yehoshua answered them that it's permissive. It's not a Torah obligation to daven Marv, it's only a Rishus. Ba'alifnei Rabbi Gamliel, then the same person went in front of Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi, and they said to him, Tefillas Arvis Rishus o Chova. Amar Lei, Rabbi Gamliel said it's a Chova. Rabbi Gamliel said davening Marv is absolutely a requirement. It's not a Rishus. Now you got to love these guys, right? Because it doesn't matter whether you're in Baton Rouge or Yerushalayim, you'll always find these guys who love to stir up trouble. So what does it say? This guy first went to Rabbi Yeshua, then he went to Rabbi Gamliel. And when he hears that Rabbi Gamliel gave a different answer, what does he say? Amar le v'halo, Rabbi Yeshua, Amar lo reshus. Rabbi Yeshua said it was a reshus. Rabbi Gamliel, you're telling me it's a chova? Rabbi Yeshua said it was a reshus. These guys are always around. Amar le, Rabbi Gamliel was not happy about this. Wait until we have our Knesset. There's certain times a week that the whole group of all the best top Torah scholars would get together and they would learn Torah together. He says, well, tomorrow when we have the Knesset, we'll see what Rabbi Yeshua says then. So that's what happened. Shikshanosu Bali Trisin Ahmad Hashoel, the same person was asked to stand up and he asked, Vishoel, Tfilas Arvis Rishus Ochova. Amar le Rabbi Gamliel, and Rabbi Gamliel restated his position in front of all the great Torah scholars and he said, Chova. He said it's an obligation. Amar lehen Rabbi Gamliel, Klum yesh adam shecholik b'davar hazeh. Of all the Torah scholars here, does anyone disagree with me? Does anyone say it's a rishus? Because I've now said it's a chova. And no one said anything. Even Rabbi Yeshua, he's looking directly at Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, lo, Amar le, he says, I may have had a different opinion, but the Nasi has spoken. Once the Nasi's spoken, the conversation is over. Amar le v'alo mishbecha, Amar le rishus. I heard that you said it was a rishus yesterday. Amar le Yoshua, Amad al raglecha v'yedu ba imcha Rabbi Yeshua al raglev. Says Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yoshua, you go stand in the corner. All day long. Rabbi Yeshua was not a young man. But Rabbi Gamliel says, because you disagreed with me yesterday, stand in the corner. Mind you, Rabbi Yeshua, again, I have to publicly ask Mechila from Rabbi Gamliel. I'm only trying to teach what's going on in the Gemara here. Rabbi Gamliel was someone that we can only aspire to be like. He was a great Torah scholar, and you'll see by the time we get to the end of the shir today that Rabbi Gamliel earned his place in great Torah lore among all the tzaddikim. But nevertheless, there were certain conflicts that went on during the time. But Rabbi Gamliel, he said, listen, I heard that you said it was a rishus yesterday. I have to show everybody who's in charge. And I said it was a chov. You said it was a rishus. You have to be punished. So he puts him in the corner of the room. He let him sit there all day long. Now, mind you, this was not the first run-in that Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua had had. Great Rabbanim can often come to different conclusions on different matters. Someone's looking at it through this, and someone's looking at it through this. We don't always agree with each other, and that's an okay thing. That's how we learn. But nevertheless, the Gemara talks about just before this another Maisa where Rabbi Yehoshua had calculated Rosh Chodesh to be one day, and Rabbi Gamliel had calculated it to be another day, and Rabbi Gamliel said, fine, you think that last week was Rosh Hashanah? So I'll tell you what, you think that Wednesday is going to be Yom Kippur. I say Thursday is going to be Yom Kippur. So just to show you who's in charge, Wednesday, I'm ordering you to come to me and have lunch in front of me on the day that you think it's Yom Kippur. Because I think it's Erev Yom Kippur when it's a mitzvah to eat, and everyone has to see that you follow me and not Rabbi Yeshua. And again, Rabbi Gamliel had very glot reasons for wanting to do this, but nevertheless, sometimes people thought he was being a little heavy-handed. Certainly by 21st century standards today, people would think that. But here's what happened. He's standing there in the corner, and some of the other great scholars thought, this is not right. Rabbi Gamliel's becoming a little bit too heavy-handed and trying to show people who's in charge. Maybe it's time for another Nasi. So the first thought was, you know what? Okay, so Rabbi Gamliel's got this pattern of being heavy-handed. Maybe we should put Rabbi Yeshua in charge. People said, no, you can't put Rabbi Yeshua in charge. He was a baldover here. He was involved in this. It would look like we're choosing sides, and that's not what this is about. So they didn't want to take Rabbi Yeshua. So it says then, look about 4 lines from the bottom, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. Then they came upon Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, who, by the way, was the author of that first Mishnah we learned on source number 1 about having balance in your life. Let's pick him, Dehu Chacham. Listen to the criteria. This is why we're going to pick Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. Dehu Chacham, he's a wise man. V'hu Ashir, and he's a wealthy man. V'hu Asiri La'azara, and he's a descendant from Ezra. Hu Chacham, and he's a Chacham. This is why we should choose Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. So they approached Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, and they said, these are the important criteria. Why? Why do we care if he's wealthy? Because that way he can interact with the government. Why do we care that he's descended from Ezra? That way he has Suchas Avos. These are all the reasons they decided Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah is the right man for the job. He's going to be the next Nasi. And here's where the profound limudim start coming in. Buckle up, okay? Here's the first one. What does Rebbe Eliezer do when they approach him and say, we want you to be the next Nasi? V'imlech b'inshei beisi. He went to consult with his household. There's an interesting idea. You're going to make a career decision. You're going to make a decision on taking a new position, a new job, where all of a sudden you're going to be living under a microscope and all your family is going to be in a different world. Maybe you should consult them first because it affects them also. Little lesson to take home from this Gemara. Also, then he consulted specifically with his wife after he consulted with his household. And listen to the genius. His wife says to him, flip over to source number, I guess it's the same source, just the next page, 3a. Dilma v'avir necha amar la yoma chada b'kisei d'mekar l'machar. You know, this is not what you want to get involved with, Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. Today they got rid of Rebbe Gamliel. They could hire you for one day to be Nasi, and next week they get rid of you. If you're that easily put in charge, you can that easily be deposed, just like Rebbe Gamliel. What do you need that for? Wise words, right? If that's where the people are holding, that they're just going to transition from a great man like Rebbe Gamliel, then they're going to do the same thing to you when they're not happy with you. And then listen to this. This is, I don't know how old the average guy is in here, but you're young. Listen to this. Yom achada bekisei demukro l'mochar say amar lei les l'cha chayurta ahu yoma bartamne. Sorry, Shani Hayishar. You're right. They may get rid of me tomorrow. But what can I accomplish today? Today I'll be Nasi. What can I accomplish today? It's not always about the next 25 years. Yes, it's important for a person to have long-term plans because if you don't have goals, you don't get anywhere. But the value of every day. Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah is telling his wife, yes, you're right, they may get rid of me in a day, in a week, but for today, I can make a difference. Today, I can make a difference. The opportunities of today are here. And after consulting with his wife and his family, he said, you know what, I can't pass up such an opportunity. I have ideas. I have Torah I want to share. I want to be in the big seat so that I can be mashpia on many people, even if it's only for a day. Listen to the next lesson. First of all, you may have heard this also. Hashem made a miracle that his beard grew to be white overnight because Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah was a young man and he woke up the next day, he looked like he was 70 years old. Anyway, listen to what he does. His first day on the job. Tana osa yom sakul l'shomer hapesach. Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah removed the guard from the door. What are we talking about? Sorry? Nice guess, but no. Crazy as it seems, I like your answer better. Crazy as it seems, and again, we're applying 21st century values to the time of the Gemara, which was different. Rebbe Gamliel, when he was Nasi, did not allow everyone to come into the Beis Medrash. You had to be holding. He didn't want guys coming in getting a snippet here, a snippet there. He wanted, if you're in, you're in. And you had to be a great Torah scholar to be in the Beis Medrash of Rebbe Gamliel. So he had a guard outside who knew which names and which people were allowed to come into the Beis Medrash. Can you imagine such a thing? Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, the first day on the job, he got rid of the guard. That's his first. And people are streaming in. Regular people. People that had jobs. People that didn't know much Torah. They all had this craving to learn. And Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah took them all in. And then the Gemara goes on to say they had to bring in that there was extra 400 benches, and some said it was extra 700 benches they had to bring. We're halfway down these narrow lines now. And then Rebbe Gamliel saw all the people coming to the Beis Medrash, how crowded it was, how many benches they had to add, and Rebbe Gamliel wondered, have I been costing people not to learn Torah? That was not my intent. My intent was to, produce great Torah scholars. You can't have a little bit of information in the hands of an ignoramus. It could be dangerous. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see 700 new benches full of people trying to learn Torah. Was I wrong? Was I responsible for so many people not learning Torah? And by the way, how many people think this sounds like a little bit hard-handed of not letting people in to learn? Yeah, we do it today. There's certain yeshivas where, you have to be the best guy to get in. There's certain seminaries where you have to be the best girl to get in. It used to be in the olden days, after the time of Rebbe Gamliel, yeshivas were about making people great, not bragging about the great guys that you took in. So this is a problem we've always had, and it goes all the way back to this time. But nevertheless, this is what's going on. They had a guard to keep people out of the Beis Medrash, but Rebbe Gamliel saw all the people that were coming to learn Torah, and he felt bad. So again, that's another great musar from this Gemara. Rebbe Gamliel was the Nasi. And even after he was deposed, he had his followers. But it wasn't like Rebbe Gamliel to say, hey, I had my way and I was right, and these people are not doing it the right way. No, he's always learning. He's always taking in more information to see whether he had made the right decision. Now listen to this. I'm going to give you a couple more Mishnayos to think about for a second that deal with Rebbe Gamliel and understand a little bit more about the man. Go to source number 4. Maisa Rebbe Gamliel uzakanim shahaya mesubim bebayis b'yasam benzonim belud. There was a Rebbe Gamliel and some zakanim were learning together in Lud. V'haya oskin b'hilchas Pesach. They were learning the halachas of Pesach all night. Kol alayla ad karos hagever, until the rooster crowed. Hagbiyam lifneim v'nodar halochel the Beis Medrash. And from the rooster crowing, they knew it was time to daven. They went to the Beis Medrash. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Has anybody ever heard a version of this Mishnah before? Where did you hear it?
The Haggadah.
Exactly right. We have a Mishnah in the Haggadah which is practically the same,
Except it's Shema.
with 3 differences. 3 very small differences. And that's what you have on source number 5. Flip over to source number 5 and you'll see the Mishnah from the Haggadah, which is slightly different. In this Mishnah, it wasn't Rebbe Gamliel who was learning. It was Rebbe Lezer and Rebbe Yoshua, our old friend. Rebbe Lezer ben Azariah, the new Nasi. Rebbe Akiva, Rebbe Tarfon, Shahya Besubim ben Brak. Difference number 2. They weren't learning in Lud, they were in Bnei Brak. Non-substantive difference. And they were learning about Yetzias Mitzrayim all night long. Ad Shabo Talmideim v'Amru Lahem Rabbeinu Hiyagia Zman Kriyas Shema Shacharis. What's the last difference here? No roosters. Rebbe Gamliel was approached and told it was time for Kriyas Shema by roosters. Rabbi Yeshua had to be awoken by his Talmidim to tell him, Rebbe, I know you're engrossed in learning the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, but it's time for davening. Those are the only differences in this Mishnah. One's in Lud, one's in Bnei Brak. One's Rabbi Yeshua and his Chaverim, one's Rabbi Gamliel and his Chaverim. But what were they learning?
Story of the Exodus versus the...
Exactly. Rabbi Yeshua is being Mesaper Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. He's telling over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Rabbi Gamliel is learning the halachas of Pesach. This is the different things that they're learning the night of the Seder. What is the mitzvah on the night of the Seder?
To remember the Exodus.
To remember the Exodus is the mitzvah every day. But to tell over the story, Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, that's the special mitzvah of Pesach. To tell over the story, how it happened, what happened, all the nisim, that's the mitzvah of the night of Pesach. Learning the halachas of Pesach is a very nice thing, but it's not the mitzvah hayom. Why do you suppose Rebbe Gamliel was learning Hilchos Shel Pesach the night of the Seder?
He had already told the story.
I'm sorry?
He'd already done the mitzvah.
Likely. Why didn't he do it more? That's the mitzvah, to tell it all night, as long as you can. Why was he learning Hilchos Pesach? So I don't know, but I suspect that the reason was because he was the Nasi. And he was the posek. And people came to him and needed to know, I dropped this and this came in it and I didn't have a chance to kosher this. All the halachos of Pesach. What's the shear? This matzah is a little bit thicker. How much matzah do I have to eat for it to be? Rebbe Gamliel is being flooded with halachic shilas. He was the man. That's who everyone came to with their shilas. So what does he have to do? He has to always be a baki in the halachas. So the night of Pesach, when people are coming to him all night long with shilas, he's learning the halachas of Pesach. Rabbi Yoshua, as the Torah scholar, not charged with the obligations of the Nasi, he had the luxury of just doing the mitzvah hayom. Think a little bit about the achrayas. You talk about a Moreh D'Asra of a shul, or whatever it is, and Rabbi Breitowitz can tell you about this firsthand. You don't always get to learn what you want to learn. You have responsibilities to the klal. And you have to be able to be available to them to answer their halachic shilas and their questions, what some would call the burdens of leadership. Our Rabbanim have always been tasked with that. And here you have Rabbi Gamliel in the Mishnah, it's talking, couldn't be more clear. Rabbi Gamliel doesn't have the luxury to be Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim all night. He's got to be becoming a baki in Hilchas Pesach, because that was his charge and that was his role. Yeah, he was the Nasi, and yeah, he thought it was important for people to understand that the Nasi is the descendant of Malchus Beis David. But he also understood that that meant he had responsibilities. Then look at source number 6. This is a Mishnah from a little bit later on in Avos. And it seems like we've come to a new role. This is Rabbi Gamliel again. Rabbi Gamliel, Benosha Rabbi Yehuda, Anasi Omer, Yafa Talmud Torah, Im Derech Eretz, Sheyagia Shnei Meshachas Avon. The Chol Torah Sheiniyama Malacha Sofa B'Teilim. The same thing we had in the first Mishnah, which wasn't Rabbi Gamliel. This is now Rabbi Gamliel singing the song of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that you need balance in your life. It's not enough just to learn Torah. You also have to have an avoda. It's not enough to be this kind of person. You have to have that also. Everything has to be balanced, or you can't have one without the other. Read it in English. Rabbi Gamliel said, excellent is the study of Torah together with an occupation, for the exertion in both of them causes averas to be forgotten. And all Torah in the absence of an occupation comes to nothing in the end and leads to avera. And all who are tzarchei tzibur, who work for the community, let them work in the Shem Shemayim, for the merit of their ancestors sustains them. This is now Rabbi Gamliel preaching about balance. It wasn't just that he saw all the benches in the Beis Medrash and said, hey, maybe I have been keeping too many people out of the Beis Medrash. Maybe everybody should come in. He was a changed man by the time we get to the end of this. And perhaps that gives us a little bit of an insight into source number 7. Source number 7, in order to understand, we have to fast forward about 1,200 years. This is from the Rambam. The Rambam really codified this idea in Hilchas Deis. It's not really part of the not really stated as halacha, but rather as Eitzah Tovas, but most people consider Deis to be halachas. It says here, Haderech HaYishar Hi Midas Beinanis. Person has to have a balanced approach to everything. Take the people in this room. There are some people in this room, just by virtue of the numbers, that may have a little bit too quick of a temper. They argue a little too fast, a little too intensely, and maybe not with proper derech eretz to the other person. There's a handful of you in here. That's just the way it is. What does the Rambam say? No. Even when you're arguing with someone, there's a purpose for arguing, but you have to do it in derech eretz in a balanced way. The Rambam says this about everything. Should a person just be ultra generous? Says the Rambam, no, you have to be balanced. If you give away all your money, you're not going to have any food to eat tomorrow. You have to give away money for tzedakah and help aniyim, but you have to keep enough that you can sustain yourself. The Rambam says this about every midah. Doesn't matter what a particular person's challenges are, the Rambam has a one-size-fits-all approach. Whatever your midah is that you feel you need to work on, the Rambam says you drag it as far as you can to the other side, so that way you'll end up in the middle. The goal is always to be balanced. So whatever the midah is, you're someone who wants to be rabidly wealthy, and you're therefore constantly chasing money all your life. You have to go this way and become someone who's very generous and gives away even a little bit more than most people normally would, to teach yourself that this is the way you should be with your money, to be generous with it, until eventually you're in the middle again. That's the goal for everything. Talk about a limud from Rebbe Gamliel. These are our greatest Torah scholars after the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And we have this friction between the Nasi and the Gadol Hadar, people who only want the right for Klal Yisrael, but people who have different roles in Klal Yisrael. And they all are trying to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean they all see it the same way. And it doesn't mean because two Rabbanim are having a machlokas in Torah that they don't get along, and it doesn't mean they don't have derech eretz for each other, chas v'shalom. It means that they have different perspectives on things because they're different people. But everyone's got the same goal, to enhance the beauty of Klal Yisrael, to enhance the ashiris of Klal Yisrael and being Ovdei Hashem. And sometimes for the executive, the Nasi, the role has to take into consideration some things that the Gadol Hadar doesn't have to be worried about. The Gadol Hadar is allowed to learn about Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim all night. The Nasi doesn't have that luxury. Would he want to? Sure. But then would we have anyone learning halachas to the point where they could paskin the difficult shilas that come up? We need poskim, and we need Rosh Yeshivas, and we need people with different perspectives. Everyone has a chelik in Torah. There's, again, I don't know how many people are in this room, but each of you has different kochos. Some of you are geniuses. And some of you are the type of people who can sit down at 6 a.m. and plug away all day till the middle of the night. And some of you are the types of people that are philosophical and have those kinds of minds. Remember, the Rambam himself had challenges in his lifetime from other chachamim who didn't think that Jewish philosophy was an appropriate place for a Torah scholar to be applying his time. The Rambam held it was. Different shitas for different people, not just because they had different shitas, because people are different people. Again, I said this last time I was here, but it would be a fascinating experiment to take the trajectory of each person in here over the next 10 years. Because there are going to be outstanding individuals that come from within this room. Every year at Ar Sameach they do, every year. Nobody knows who they are. Some people are going to excel and be the greatest eye surgeon that the Shah will come and get eye surgery from. And someone else will become the next Rosh Yeshiva in Torah V'das. There's different kochos for different people. But the trajectories of the people here, there's one thing that's guaranteed. They're going to be disproportionately outstanding. Because that's what Jews are. I don't want to get too much into the political stuff. I have one other source here for another shir that I'm giving later, but I'll share it with you for a minute. The idea that Jews are special, because as I mentioned last time, I got a chuckle from Rabbi Breitowitz, but God was the first racist. Ki am kadosh atal Hashem Elokecha, because you are a special people for Hashem. B'cha bochar Hashem Elokecha, Hashem chose you, the chosen people, lios lo le'am segula, to be a treasured people. Well, that's just that scripture stuff. We all know that's for the home team, right? Well, then look at what's at the bottom of this page. Did you know that from 1900 to 2000, 20% of all Nobel Prizes were won by Jews? Now, again, I'm not saying that this is the goal for everyone to win Nobel Prizes, but to deny that Jews are special, you have to deny facts. I know we do that today, by the way. No problem. Deny facts, it's okay. That's what they tell you in the Goyish world today. But if you want to stick to the facts are Jews have always been disproportionately outstanding people. And this room is no different. You're going to be disproportionately outstanding people. But grab what Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah said. I don't know what's going to be next year, but today, what chance do I have? What can I accomplish today? And yes, have your long-term goals, but understand the value of each day and produce what you produce, and it'll be far disproportionate to what you thought you could. I'm saving a few minutes for questions, though, so go ahead. Yes, sir.
You mentioned previously about the importance of Torah learning in conjunction with some sort of avodah. Are you referring to like work, like ishtablut for parnasah?
Well, again, that's not a Fink concept. That's a Shulchan Aruch concept. Yeah, I mean that's all of our people in the Gemara had jobs. As Klal Yisrael, there's very few times, very few periods of time where we had the luxury to be able to just learn. That was never something we had. And if you were obsessed with only learning, and that was your obsession, you often didn't have food to feed your family. And again, there's halach in Shulchan Aruch that a man has an obligation to support his family. We read it under every Jewish wedding in the Ksuba. That's an obligation that we take on, is to support our families. It shouldn't become the priority, and it shouldn't become what you chase after all day long, but that idea of balance, the Rambam talks about also in Hilchos Deis. It's a very Jewish concept, the idea of learning and being able to support yourself.
So I understand that, and you said there needs to be a balance, but it seems to me that there are a lot of Rebbeim that talk about minimizing as much as possible the amount you work. and that one who feels the need to work more to make more panas, and not for bad reasons, is someone who's is not really have his priorities fairly right, and is there a contradiction there?
I don't think so. There are those who say that. And as I said, there's different strokes for different folks. We all have a mitzvah to learn Torah every day. That there's no question about. But there's always also been a Shevet Levi of people who are miyuchad to learn Torah all day long. So between those two extremes, there's a room for a lot of other people. Some people who are learning 3/4 time, some people who are learning half time, whatever it is. There is a halacha d'oraisa, though, for people to support their families. Does that mean they have to have steak every night? No. It means they have to be able to be supported and have a place to live. They have to be able to be sustained. It doesn't mean they have to have a Porsche or a Lamborghini in their driveway. There are people that get way too caught up in the idea. It's not about supporting myself. It's about supporting myself handsomely. It's a different world. Different world. And again, there are different people. Different people need different things. But I don't think there's a contradiction there. We're all machshav Torah, the chiyuv to learn Torah, but we know there's halacha in Shulchan Aruch that a person has to support their family. A person is not supposed to sit on the street and beg money unless he has no alternative. But, yeah.
So we mentioned the opening of the doors of the Beis Midrash from Rabbi Eliezer, and in the source 4 and 5, we there's like source 4 is the one that says that they were learning the laws. And source 5 is the one that says that they were telling the story.
Correct.
So I mean, I was just wondering if it could be interpreted that also the approach with which Rabbi Gamliel's Talmidim were studying was such level of concentration and that we said like only the greatest Talmidei Chachamim would be studying in his place, so that they kind of they were so focused that they were counting on the sound of the animal, how is it called? The animal?
The rooster, yeah.
The rooster. Which, on the other hand, when you have a lot of people in the Beis Midrash and all this, like it was more likely to be received the sipur and it was more like the essence of the approach that perhaps Rabbi Eliezer was trying to encourage people in certain Jewish learning. I don't know.
I think that's for sure true. And it's not a coincidence that certain people are flocking to Rabbi Gamliel and other people are flocking to Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah and Rabbi Yeshua. There's a different Rebbe style may resonate more with one set of Talmidim than another, and that's okay. That's why we have more than one Rebbe to teach Torah. Some people will have the brilliance in Gon and Gemara learning. Other people have tremendous Bekias and Medrash and Hashkafa, or even the Balaturim. The Balaturim had time to write a whole commentary on Gematrias. You know, in the yeshivish world, Gematria is considered a little shticky. You know, it's not really, but Gematrias are brilliant. You know, if you and I sat down with a calculator and a computer, we couldn't come up with any of the Gematrias of the Balaturim. There's a man had a genius for this stuff. And what I particularly find beautiful about the Balaturim's commentary is that I learn a Gemara with Hillel and Shammai having a machlokas. Next week, you light Hanukkah candles. You light one the first night and two the second night, 8. The Gemara says there was a machlokas. Some people thought you should light 8 the first night, 7 the second night, 6. And the Balaturim figures this same machlokas out by Gematria. And to me, that's just a beautiful reaffirmation of the Torah being Min HaShamayim, because there's Shiva Panim LaTorah. You can figure out the same answer from Gematrias, you can figure out from Svara and Shammai and Hillel going back and forth. There's so many different ways of getting to the same right answer because the Torah is emes. And as long as everyone's getting to the truth, it doesn't really matter if you're using the Gematria route or whether you're using the Shakavataya route. But I think your point's exactly right. There's a reason certain people flocked to Rebbe Gamliel. They were going to be the next set of poskim. They were going to be the next set of decisive decision people with executive orders. On that same line, we have something called the Anshe Knesset Gdola. You probably heard of them. Men of the Great Assembly, after time 400 BCE about. And these people had to design and foretell and foresee the next 2,000 years of where Klal Yisrael were going to be. What was a gullus of 2,000 years going to look like? How are they going to survive with Jews scattered all around the world? And they created this idea of having shuls, a mikdash me'at, a small mini Beis Hamikdash in every community, so people would live together. And they created all these other things to make sure that we bonded as a community and could support each other. The genius of this body. Many people mistakenly think that the Anshe Knesset Gdola was only Nevi'im. No, there was a handful of Nevi'im left, Malachi, Daniel, Mordechai, a few others on the Anshe Knesset Gedolah. But according to most sources, the Anshe Knesset Gedolah was made up of 3 bodies of people. One set were our great Rabbanim and Nevi'im that were left over. Another third was what we call today Askanim, people that get things done, the executive function type people. And the other third was who? The Gvirim, the wealthy people. Someone had to fund everything. That was the trifecta that together was able to plot a course for Klal Yisrael that would sustain them over the next 2,000 years. Anyone else? Yeah.
You said in the with the Nobel Prize, talking about how Jews are more special than others. You said 20 Jews.
20%.
Yeah.
And again, it's a very controversial thing because the first thing that people say when they hear this, is particularly in the Goyish Welt, why are Jews winning all these Nobel Prizes? And by the way, it's not just in medicine, it's in literature, it's in music, and it's in every field. Why is that? Because they're disproportionately wealthy. You listen to the progressive politicians in America today, they say the Jews control everything through their money. And they forget the fact that after 1900, there was that little historical event called the Holocaust, where they were putting our ancestors in ovens. And then you think it was good after that? Let me tell you something. In the 1950s, when you came to America, you couldn't get a job if you were Jewish. You couldn't go to university. If you wanted to go to Hollywood, you had to change your name. Every Jew that worked in Hollywood, every fry Jew, every non-observant Jew who wanted to go to Hollywood, whether they were a comedian, an actor, whatever it is, they all had to change their name. You couldn't get a job. There was no Katzenberg, Geffen people running Hollywood until the 70s and 80s. You couldn't get a job. And I think I told this here once before, but I'll share it with you. We have a minute left. About 25 years ago, my wife and I went to an exhibit at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. It was a whole exhibit on Jewish emigration to America. And I did tell this here before, but in any event, it was a very complimentary exhibit in general about how Jews had come with nothing and picked themselves up by their bootstraps. And one part of the exhibit we get to is a credit report from the W.R. Dunn Company, which was the precursor to Dun & Bradstreet. And they had a credit report there for a Mr. Strauss. And this is the actual credit report they had on a big mounted plaque there. It said, Mr. Strauss does have a good reputation for repaying his debts. However, his ancestors did loot the crown jewels of Egypt and never returned them. That was an actual credit report from the late 1800s. Jews were not welcome in many places, and they certainly weren't prospering because of all the handouts and all of the opportunities that were given to them. Jews have prospered everywhere because of they're special. There's no two ways about it. And again, you can deny the facts, but that's the only way to get around it. Jews have always disproportionately exceeded the numbers that they represent. Jewish people represent 0.25% of the world's population, and they're winning 20% of the Nobel Prizes. But by the way, make no mistake, that doesn't mean that you get to sit back and, I'm a member of the chosen people. I'm all that. It's just the opposite, because it doesn't mean that we're going to be great in a good way. It means that everything we do is magnified. That's why the greatest crooks in history, whether it's Bernie Madoff or somebody else, also happen to be Jewish. Jewish people are magnified. Everything they do is magnified. That's why the whole world is obsessed with a tiny little sliver of land in the Middle East called Israel, because everything we do is magnified. Everything everyone in this room does in their lifetime will be magnified. But it's up to you to choose how it's going to be magnified. Will it be greatness in the field of curing cancer? Will it be greatness in the field of Limud Torah? Or chas v'shalom, something on the other side? Seize today. You all have opportunities today. Something as simple as wishing someone a good day and being a good friend to somebody. You have no idea how one act of chesed can change the world for the positive. Today is a day, like Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah said. Today I can make a difference. Make your long-term plans, but what can you do today? And again, I'm very grateful for everyone being here and sitting through this, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank Rabbi Breitowitz again. As I've told him many times, on the other side of the world, we learn Rabbi Breitowitz's Torah all the time. Of all the people we discuss, he's one of the people that my sons, my son-in-law, my daughters, my wife, we all love listening to his shiurim. My son, who came here today, did not come to hear me. As he points out, he gets to hear me all the time. He wanted to meet Rabbi Breitowitz. So I'm not only Makar Tov to him, but all of you should realize what an opportunity it is to learn from such a great man, and you should continue to be Matzliach in your learning in every way. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry, I do have to run, baby.
I've never seen you not running.
It made my trip even more worth it. Sorry? It made my trip even more worth it.
Oh, thank you. Where are you coming from?
From Lakewood.
Oh, very nice. I didn't know you were still living there. Okay, do you know Yitzi Cohen? It's a big town, Lakewood, I know.
No.
Okay. I'll try to look you up next time I'm there. Thank you.
Are we allowed to keep these or no?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, something else. Let me give you all my email if you have any questions or you want to stay in touch.
Joey, thank you.
Nice to meet you. If anybody wants to take it down, I'll give it to you. I'm sorry, I should have given it to you.